Resourceful Designer, episode 178, using social media to promote your design business.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing. And now, your host. His first car had a CB radio in it, and he went by the handle Dr. D, Mark DeCote.
Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me this week. In this episode, I'll be joined by Andrea Jones, a social media expert, as we discuss ways to promote our design businesses over social media. Now, I know many designers, myself included, find social media very difficult to navigate when it comes to trying to promote our business and get clients, and that's what Andrea is going to help us with. Now, because this is an interview episode, I'm not going to have a resource of the week, and I'm not going to have a question of the week. We're going to get right into the interview. But before I do that, I just want to let you know that Andrea was gracious enough to offer an exclusive discount to Resourceful Designer listeners to her Savvy Social School. Now, I'm a member of her Savvy Social School, and I have to tell you that I have learnt a lot from Andrea. Some of the courses included within the school are ways to use Instagram, LinkedIn. She has a special masterclass with secrets to getting paying clients through LinkedIn, the best way to use Instagram stories to grow your business, the do's and don'ts of hashtags, and the best courses of actions you can take to grow your social media following. And that's not all. She also offers live monthly training where you can get on and talk to her and ask questions, and she will help you out. Plus, there's a private Facebook community that she is very active in, and everybody else helps each other in there, and it's all geared towards social media. So if you are having any problems with social media or you think that you need help boosting it, I highly suggest you join her Savvy Social School. And as I said, Andrea has offered a $20 discount on the monthly cost of the school. Now, you can only get that discount by visiting resourcefuldesigner.com/savvy, that's SAVVY, and that will automatically apply the discount to your registration. Now, I wanted to mention that very generous offer from Andrea before we get into the interview. And then after hearing what she has to say, you can decide if Savvy Social School is something for you. But for now, let's get on to the interview. Joining me on the podcast today is Andrea Jones, a social media strategist who helps clients build their online presence through targeted social media and content marketing. You can find her online at onlinedrea.com. Now, I first met Andrea at a podcast conference last year and was immediately attracted to her passion and her enthusiasm for what she does. And at that time, she had just launched her very own podcast, Savvy Social Podcast. And as one often does at a podcast conference, after our short conversation, I added her show to my list so that I can check it out later. And I downloaded the handful of episodes that she had already released, and I listened to them in the days that followed the conference. And I quickly became a fan of hers, and I've listened to every one of her episodes ever since. When it comes to social media, Andrea knows her stuff. Not only has she turned social media into her career, she even met her husband on social media. But for that story, you'll have to listen to her podcast. So when I decided it was time to do an episode of Resourceful Designer about social media to grow our design business, I just had to reach out and get Andrea on the show. So Andrea, welcome to Resourceful Designer.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I'm super flattered to hear that you listen to all the podcast episodes. You know how much time and energy we put into these things. So it's always nice to hear things like that.
Oh, I know. Now, Andrea, I'm just going to dive right into the deep end here. When it comes to finding clients and promoting a freelance business on social media, I find that most designers, myself included, we don't really know what we're doing. So what would be the first piece of advice you would give to a freelance graphic or a freelance web designer who's sitting at home right now thinking, how should I use social media to grow my design business?
I think the first thing to really kind of hit on when you're thinking about growing your business using social media is that this is just one element of your marketing strategy. So I think the challenge is not spending too much time or not putting all your eggs in one basket, so to speak, because it's a very powerful tool, but it can easily turn into a time-wasting tool. So we want to make sure that we are spending the right amount of time. I suggest 3 hours a week. And for a lot of us, If we're a service-based business, that's a reasonable amount of time. 2 to 3 hours a week we can set aside to using these tools to grow our business. And really, the power is in the connection. So I'm sure we'll talk about how to create content and how to put yourself out there and that sort of thing. But the most important thing that you can get away from social media is that it's a really unique opportunity to connect with someone who could eventually give you money for your time, which is what we're here for, give you money for the things that you do, graphic designing and that sort of thing. And so if you kind of approach social media from that aspect, we're going to spend a minimum amount of time of 2 to 3 hours, and we're going to really focus on finding the right people. I think that your strategy, however you build it out, will then become so much more impactful, and you'll not get burned out, number one. And number two, you'll actually start seeing results from social media.
Oh, that's wonderful. Actually, that was one of my questions on my list is what's the minimum we should be doing? So that's good to know that 2 to 3 hours, it doesn't seem overpowering, especially when you break it up across a week. When you're thinking of that, I'm just thinking in my head for what I'm doing right now. Should I be including weekends on that? Is weekends a proper time to be promoting our business, or should we be doing it just during the quote unquote weekdays?
I think for what we do, during the weekdays is the most impactful way. I do find that sometimes weekends can be okay, but you want to give yourself time off. So if you decide to do Wednesday through Sunday instead of Monday through Friday, that's totally fine. I think you can still see results from that, but I do want you to give yourself some time off because we need time off. We can't be working all day, every day.
Mm-hmm. No, I hear you there. When it comes to creating content, what I find is most designers online are creating great content to attract other designers as followers, but those are not the clients. So as a designer, somebody who's trying to build and grow their business, what sort of content should we be producing out there to attract clients as opposed to just other designers liking our stuff?
Yeah, that's a good question because I think we have almost like an industry speak that we like to use online. And we have to think more about the consumer, the potential client's experience rather than our other designers' experience. So the easiest way to do that is to use the words your clients are using. So when I'm on a consultation call with a client and they say something like, I want a social media square, I would never call it that personally, but that's what the client said. So now I'm making a mental note. Okay, the client views this thing that I'm creating as a social media square. So maybe I should use some of those languaging and that type of languaging in my social media posts. So it may be just keeping that top of mind and taking some notes. I like to use Google Keep for this. So I actually have a Google Keep file of how people describe their challenges on social media. And I will try to use those words on my social media pages and in my marketing in general. This works for websites and proposals and any client communication that you may have. Try to use their own words because I know we like to use words that we know what they mean, but sometimes the clients don't really understand. Even using this for portfolio pieces. So a really great thing to post as a designer is showcasing your portfolio pieces. So if you're showcasing something, really, again, the imaging can, other designers can admire it and look at it, but use the caption as a chance to explain what is going on in this post, explain what you're showcasing. And really write it to the level of a fourth grader. Like write it simply so that anyone can read it and understand it. And I think that, keeping in mind how fast social media is, we want people to glance at it and instantly know what it is. So really kind of almost like dumb it down a little bit.
So instead, say somebody designed a beautiful logo for a company, instead of just posting, here's a logo I did for a company, explain a little bit on why you designed that logo and how it affected the company and so forth.
Yeah, and even talk about how that company is going to use the logo. Because I think some people don't even understand how that could happen. So this is a logo that now this company has an asset they can forever be putting on their website, on their marketing materials, in their social media posts, really list it out so people go, oh, that's great. I want one of those. Whereas a logo can sometimes seem a little bit abstract to people. Like, what would they do with this? So I know you and I, we know what to do with it. But for a potential client, if they're looking at this, they may not be thinking about all the different ways a logo can be used in their business. And so that could be a post. Here's a logo I created, and here's the different ways this company could potentially use this. I think that's such a powerful way to really illustrate the impact of the designs that you're creating.
So when you're doing something like that, it sounds like a mini case study that you're doing. Should we be using social media as a way to direct people to maybe a blog post for that case study, or should the social media post itself be the case study, like write the whole thing there?
It depends on how long your case studies are, but I do suggest having a home base for the collection of them. For example, if you have a case study on a logo that you designed, you can have that portion that talks about where this logo is going in the full case study. So when you're posting it on social media, you're simply taking snack-sized bites of that case study. So if you have one case study, you really could turn it into 4 or 5 different posts. You can talk about the challenges a client approached you with. That's in the case study, and then that's also one social media post. Your second post on social media could be about the research that went into designing it. So that goes in the case study, and that's a separate second social media post. So your case study can actually be quite long and lengthy, but you're just kind of taking little highlights, little pieces from that post and sharing it on social media. So one case study turns into, let's say, 5 posts. And then once you've done those 5 posts, you can start from the top again and do them again. I really do think sometimes too, we post our case study once on social media and then that's it. And we really need to be posting it a lot more often than that. So, that one case study can live for a very long time. And so you kind of want to keep rotating through the studies that you have and keep posting it. I think the current statistic is only 10% of your followers will see a post at any given time. And so that's potentially 90% of people who haven't seen this content yet. This isn't even counting the newer people who are joining your audience. So yes, that one case study can be a little bit lengthy, but it could live for quite a long time on social media.
And going back to what you said earlier, the minimum 2 or 3 hours, when you start thinking that way, if you could take one case study and break it up, then all of a sudden, that 2 or 3 hours is being very productive doing that. You've got everything there and you're not spending all that time coming up with new things.
Oh, yes.
I know I'm very guilty of what you just said. I have a few social media accounts for different projects that I work on, and I'm guilty of posting something once and never posting it again. But as you said, only a small portion of my audience will ever see that. So that's something that personally I have to keep in mind. And I'm sure a lot of other designers are doing the same thing. They'll post something just once and then forget about it. They're afraid to oversaturate or to annoy people by posting something over and over. But if most of the people don't see it, then that probably won't happen.
Yeah. And another thing to remember is that our posts are mixed in to hundreds to thousands of other posts every single day. And so while we see all of our posts because we're making them and we're posting them, even if someone saw a post today, I promise you they won't remember it 3 months from now. And so you can absolutely reuse content in that way. And that is part of the strategies that I love talking about, which is kind of recycling what you already have. You can change the caption a little bit, maybe use a different adjective or something like that. But the core concept of the post can really remain the same. And that drastically cuts down on the time that you're spending kind of creating this content for social media.
When it comes to social media and posting all that, I mean, there's so many different platforms that we can choose. I know I originally started off on Twitter, then I got onto Facebook. I only recently got onto Instagram. I've had LinkedIn, but I don't really do much over there. So when it comes to all these platforms, for somebody who's starting off or not sure what to do, where is the best place to go? Should we be bombarding everything or just concentrate on one? What's the best strategy?
I'm going to give you 2 different strategies here. The first one is if you are already using a platform and you like it, keep using that one. What I don't want to happen is people to jump ship to the one I'm going to recommend, and if you're not using it already, because I think there is a value in consistency and there's a value in, enjoying what you're doing. And I think that's something we don't talk about often. So I'll take Instagram as an example. If you like Instagram and you like using it, you're so much more likely to continue using it. But if I said use LinkedIn and you log in, you're like, I don't like this, it's confusing, I don't want to use it, then don't use it because your chances of actually utilizing that platform drop dramatically if you don't even enjoy it. So I do want you to kind of settle in on a platform that you personally like. That being said, if you're starting from ground zero, from scratch, you haven't done anything yet, right now in 2019, the best platform for service-based business owners is LinkedIn. LinkedIn is so powerful for connecting and finding the exact people who will give you money for your work. And it's so much easier than the other platforms to actually find those people. So with a platform like LinkedIn, you can search specific companies. Let's say you want to, get a contract job at Google. You could literally search for employees of Google on LinkedIn and find them. That's a lot harder to do on a platform like Instagram or Twitter. If you wanted to work with a specific niche, let's say you wanted to design websites for yoga studios, very specific, you could literally search for yoga instructors on LinkedIn and find the exact people that you want to connect with. And so there's a power in being able to kind of find those people and then also connect with them in a business-minded space. So a lot of people are using LinkedIn as a way to build their business connections. And so you have a little bit of an easier time kind of building those connections with a platform like LinkedIn.
Thinking of LinkedIn, I know I've got the free account and they're constantly asking me, here, we'll give you a month free of the LinkedIn premium and I know that's just, okay, they give me a free month and then they're going to charge me after that. Is there a benefit to having the premium version of LinkedIn in order to grow your business as opposed to just the free account?
I would suggest using the free account for 6 months consistently, the 3 hours a week I mentioned, before you upgrade. You may find some limitations, but I think you need to explore the edges first. I'll give you an example. With a free account, I believe you can only connect with a maximum of 15, 20 people per day. That's a lot of people. And for most of us, that's going to tap out our time. We really don't need more than that. But for someone who is maybe in a higher sales role, or maybe if you have an agency and you really need to get more clients, you may want to upgrade to the sales level, the premium level of the LinkedIn platform. But for most of us, if you're a freelancer or if you have more of like a boutique agency or something like that, the free account is actually very robust.
Good. Now, again, I'm using myself as the guinea pig here. I'm thinking of what I would need, and because I'm sure a lot of my listeners are in this similar boat. So when it comes to something like LinkedIn, I know that I have a personal profile where on Twitter, I run multiple. I run Resourceful Designer, but I also have my actual design business. Marksman Design is separate. And then I've got some other businesses as well. And on on Twitter, they each have their own profile. On Instagram, they each have their own profile. So I can just promote that one thing. On LinkedIn, if I have multiple things, how do I promote everything through one account?
I would keep it very specific to what your end goal is for LinkedIn. So if you're a graphic designer and you want to get design clients, I'd really optimize your profile to focus on that aspect. Now, the other projects that you have absolutely adds to your credibility. So you can still link to them in your profile as a project that you're working on. But when you're talking about posting content to LinkedIn, to the feed, I would just focus in on the goal that you want to get from LinkedIn, which in this instance would be getting more design clients. So that could work. I have the same problem where I have my sub-brand social media for podcasts. I have my Savvy Social School. I have the Savvy Social podcast. And so most of what I'm posting on LinkedIn is really focused on what clients would find helpful and useful. But I still also post my podcast episodes. I still also talk about things like the Savvy Social School, just not as much as I would on some of the other platforms. The great thing about LinkedIn is you really don't need a lot of content. Content kind of hangs out in the feed a lot longer than on other platforms. So yeah, just a nice mixture of those things, making sure to keep your primary goal front and center. And that's the focus of your content.
Oh, that's great advice. Something I definitely have to do. Now, when it comes to creating content, we talked about, if you want to do a case study on something, but if you're just creating whatever content, are we better to write it out? Are videos still the way to go? Is it just an infogram or a nice image with a quote on it? What's really drawing attention these days?
These days, it's still definitely video. Video is king. So if you have time to create video, go for it. I gave the example of 3 hours a week on one platform. So let's say you chose LinkedIn and you're ready to spend 3 hours a week. I would limit yourself to only spending one of those 3 hours on actually writing posts or doing video for LinkedIn. So if it takes you 30 minutes to put a video together, let's say you're going to do like a 5-minute tip of the day. Maybe you take a few minutes to write out what you want to say, a few minutes to actually film it, a few minutes to upload it and write a little caption. Let's say that whole process takes you 30 minutes. I would spend only 30 more minutes creating other posts for that week. So if you only get in, one video and 2 text-based posts for the week, that's great. I still think that's a really good spot to be. I don't want you to spend more time than that because now you're going into the rabbit hole of creating too much content. And as service-based businesses, we have a lot of work that needs to be done. So we really have to make sure that we're spending our time a little more wisely than that. I would recommend video if you have the time. If you don't have the time, text-based posts are doing really well right now on LinkedIn, especially if they're either informative or controversial. So if you can say something that you can take a stand for, that works really well. Anything that gets people to comment on your post basically does really well. You can add an image if you'd like. What I'm seeing lately is text-based actually works a lot better than having an image with it for some reason. But as long as your post is informative, you are on the right track. And so I think some of these other details, like should you post external links and that sort of thing, test it out for yourself and see if it works. The algorithm's constantly changing. So even my advice that I give you today, in 6 months, it may be something new. So as long as you focus in on like, how can I help someone or how can I start a conversation, you're in the right place.
Okay. And when it comes to posting videos, do we upload videos directly to LinkedIn or do we use a YouTube video and link it? Or I'm not sure how, I've never posted a video to LinkedIn, so I'm not sure how all that works.
Yeah, so you can actually post videos directly to LinkedIn as long as they're under 10 minutes. If they're over 10 minutes, you can post a link to a video. And actually, the cool thing about LinkedIn is if you post a link to your YouTube video, for instance, users can actually hit play and watch the video right on LinkedIn. It's the same on Twitter as well. With a platform like Facebook, you're getting into a gray area because they actually kind of redirect you to another page. But with LinkedIn, they can hit play and watch the video right on LinkedIn. So if you have a YouTube video, I'm all about saving time. If it's easier, just post the link to the video. You don't have to worry about uploading the native video file to LinkedIn.
Okay. Now, we've been talking a lot about LinkedIn, but some of these other platforms, Facebook, is it still in 2019? Is having a page for your business, is it still something that you recommend?
I see it almost like a Yellow Pages. or like just like a way people can see, oh, this business is here and it's legitimate. I think it's very challenging for a service-based business to make a splash on a platform like Facebook. So if you have the setup for posting content in multiple places, continue to post it to Facebook. Like if you're using a scheduling tool, that could really be helpful. But a lot of people are looking at Facebook pages as a way to just see, oh, this is a real business. I think that Facebook groups are a really great place to hang out as a freelancer or agency or something like that, because there's a lot of people who need help and they're looking for advice. And if you could be the solution to their problem, that opens so many doors for opportunity. So if you are going to kind of choose Facebook as your platform of choice, I would highly suggest looking at Facebook groups as an opportunity.
So are you talking like, I'm part of a lot of designer Facebook groups, but I'm obviously not going to find clients in there. So say using your example of a yoga studio, if you're creating websites for yoga studios, should you be joining Facebook groups for yoga enthusiasts and then helping people out there?
Absolutely. Yep. You should be in the yoga groups, even in just general fitness groups. If that's your niche, then you really need to like settle in and go all in. And just be a resource and a helpful way to help people. A lot of, just looking at the yoga industry, for instance, there are a lot of studios, but there are also a lot of individual instructors. So you not only have an opportunity at a studio level, you have an opportunity for individuals who want to just create their own brand and they need help doing it. And so just hanging out where these people hang out will give you a lot of sense of what's going on. I would limit yourself. So if you're just starting off with this, don't join more than 10 groups. Join 10, maybe see which ones are active. You could probably scroll through their feeds and see right away which ones have something going on and which ones don't. Still give yourself that time limit. So 3 hours a week between creating some content and like engaging in those groups, and see which groups get you the most kind of interest and activity and go from there.
I know the groups do work. I use that strategy to grow Resourceful Designer, the podcast. I joined probably about a dozen different design groups, and I would just go in and comment on when somebody would have a question. I would comment, I would give them an answer, but I would also say, I went into more depth on this episode of my podcast. And before you knew it, people were commenting, "Ooh, I got to listen to the podcast. I got to listen." And I know initially that's how I grew my audience. I don't do that as much these days anymore. Participate in multiple. I have just my set few that I go to all the time. But I know when I first started, there was a dozen or more different groups that I was doing that in. So that strategy does work. Now, what about something like Twitter, where you're very limited in what you can post? I mean, you've only got, what is it, 240 some characters now?
Yeah, 240.
Yeah, which, I mean, it's better than what we used to have, but still 240 characters. How can you use Twitter to promote your business with such little space?
Yeah, you have to get a little bit creative and think in even smaller sections. So I think this works great for every platform. If you could fit your message and what you have to say in an instantly scannable way, I think people are more likely to respond to it. So you're going to have to keep it short, but you can still keep it impactful, and you can still link out to other things. So, link back to that case study or link to your contact page if you want people to contact you or something like that. I think Twitter is great though for conversation. So there's a lot of people on Twitter just looking for conversation. So if you can dive into a conversation, let's say it is a yoga studio tweeting about an upcoming class, maybe you can have a conversation with them about what they need help with presenting this in a way that's visually captivating or something like that. So I think there's a lot more opportunity on a platform like Twitter to kind of dive into conversation because it's almost expected. People are tweeting stuff with the expectation of someone responding to it. So you're just kind of feeding into that a little bit.
Nice. Okay. And what about a platform like Pinterest? Is there any value to being on Pinterest as a designer?
Yes, you can use it as a portfolio piece. And Pinterest I love because the content is kind of searchable more so than the other platforms. So it almost acts like a search engine. So if you have, we'll stick with the yoga studio theme. But so if that's your niche or niche, I never know how to say that. Niche. If that's your chosen area of expertise, then now you can create pins, and you're a designer, so I won't go too much into the style of them, but you can create pins and have your caption and have them titled in such a way for people looking for graphic design for yoga studios, website for yoga's instructors, social media graphics for yoga studios. Like there's so many different ways that you can showcase your pieces and use terms that people are searching for. And this is circling back to what I said earlier about the social media square, not something I would ever say, but if someone's searching for that online, a social media square, I better be using those keywords in my pins as well so that they show up, because that's how the consumer is searching for them.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So we've talked about Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and now Pinterest. Like in my mind, those are the social media platforms. Are there any out there that are worth looking at that I might not know of?
I think for service-based business owners like ourselves, those are the primary ones. You may want to also look at YouTube if you like doing video content. But outside of those kind of major platforms, I think there are some up and coming smaller ones, but you may be spending too much time if you're going to try to explore those ones. So yeah, stick with these major ones and just pick one platform and have that really be your focus for the next 6 to 12 months.
Okay. So when it comes to creating content and all that, regardless of what platform we decide to choose as to concentrate on, what are some things that we should be avoiding doing whenever we're creating our content or posting?
I think sometimes we get so excited about what we do that we end up posting a lot, almost trying to hard sell people. So, here's my designs, book me now, sign up, buy my stuff. I think that sometimes we get really excited about what we do, that we tend to get stuck in that little groove for a little bit. And so instead of posting a lot about, with a lot of asks and a lot of calls to action, I really would challenge you to think about what the next step is. So we know the last step is that we want someone to hire us. So that's the last step. But what are some things in between hiring us that they need to do? Some things that could be sending us an email. It could be sending us a direct message. It could be even just looking at the website. So there's different ways that you can add calls to action to your post without it always being hire me, hire me, hire me. On the other side of the camp, if what I said doesn't resonate with you at all, you may be the type of person who doesn't talk about themselves at all on social media. People log on and they see pretty things, but they don't know what you do because you never say what you do. And so some of us are in that camp where we're almost scared to talk about what we do. And so to both kind of sides of that equation, I really suggest making sure that 1 out of every 5 posts reminds people what you do and how they can hire you. So you can have other posts, you can have information, you can have tips, you can share case studies, but 1 out of every 5 posts should be very clear. This is what I do, and here's how you hire me. And think about the next step. So whether that be emailing you first or booking a consultation call, but you got to be kind of like really explicit about it. Be very direct. This is what I do. This is how you hire me. And that kind of gives you a balance of, okay, we can post other things. If we have a podcast, we can post that. If we have a blog, we can post that. But you should really be talking more frequently about what you do.
Okay. Well, that's good advice. Now, when it comes to regardless again of platform, I know a lot of people talk about the strategy of purchasing ads or boosting posts and stuff like that. Is that still a viable? Like, should we be spending any money in order to try to attract people on any of these platforms?
I think it's a little bit of a slippery slope. I love organic. I love organic social media. I love connecting with people. And I think that we could potentially spend a lot of money on advertising and not see as much results as we want to. So I'm not going to say no on advertising, but I'm also going to say that I really love organic. If you have a product or if you are using ads to kind of get more awareness, like on a podcast or a YouTube video, I think you can use that as part of your strategy. But advertising directly to trying to get someone to hire you for your services can be a bit challenging. It's not a place to start, especially for beginners.
Yeah, I find I've dabbled a little bit with Facebook advertising and Instagram advertising, and I haven't been very successful with it. So it's one of those things I feel somebody just starting out, unless you really, really know what you're doing, it's very easy to lose money in the whole process. At least that's my experience so far.
Absolutely. I just think there are more impactful ways, being that a lot of us are freelancers or a lot of us maybe have like mini agencies. There are so many ways to get clients faster and more efficiently than advertising. And a lot of our clients are booking us because they know, like, and trust us. Mm-hmm. And so they're, even, messaging someone, cold calling someone may be a little bit more effective than advertising.
That's really good to know. What you just said before that, it comes down to something I've said many times on the podcast before, is that a client would prefer hire a good designer they like than an amazing designer they don't like. So the whole purpose of social media is to create that interaction, build that relationship with the clients, and get them to appreciate you and like you for what you can do before they even think of hiring you. So that's really good. Now, when it comes to all of this, you mentioned way at the beginning, tools. So what sort of tools do you recommend for different platforms, or just for scheduling, for managing, for whatever? What are the tools we can use to make this easier for us?
So my favorite right now is Social Report. And if you guys listen to the podcast, they're a sponsor of the show. So that's my caveat. But also, I started using them way before they became a sponsor. So I just love the tool, especially if you have multiple platforms. Let's say you're doing Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. It kind of puts everything in one place, so it's a lot easier. That being said, if you're just doing one platform and you're just focusing in on one thing, let's say you picked LinkedIn, you don't really need too many tools. Good old-fashioned Google document will just help if you sit down, write out what you want to do for the week. And I do suggest kind of batching it. So sit down all at once. I like to do this on Fridays. Write out what you're going to do for the following week, and then you can just copy and paste your post as you go. You can keep it very simple like that. There are a lot of free tools out there as well. One particular that I like is later.com. If you're using Instagram, that's a really great scheduling tool. And then reporting. So I like Social Report, but also there's one called Cyphe as well, CYFE, that I've used in the past. So those are some of kind of like my favorites for scheduling and managing social media. I do also like task management tools. So I use Asana, and I actually schedule myself a task every day to like check social media. And then I sit down, I do that, and I check it off. And I really try not to do it again later in the day. So that's kind of a way to keep myself on track. And then as I mentioned, on Fridays, I do my scheduling for the following week. So I actually have a task in Asana that says schedule social media posts. So this kind of keeps me on track. And if you're, doing client work, you probably use some sort of task management. Give yourself that assignment. It's okay to assign that task to yourself, and that way it doesn't get missed.
So with Social Report, the one that you're recommending right now, you can schedule your posts and all that through there so that you do it all at once and then they go out whenever they're scheduled?
Yes, that's the beautiful thing, is that you put everything into Social Report. And let's say you want to schedule to LinkedIn on Monday at 3 p.m. It'll post it for you on Monday at 3 p.m., the time that you want it to go out. So it really is great for not having to keep looking at this stuff all week. So you can schedule it out, and the cool thing too is you can modify your captions for the different platforms. So Instagram, for instance, you have that link in the bio. So you don't necessarily want to put a link in the actual post. So you can actually modify your Instagram post to say something a little bit different. And Twitter, you can shorten it because you've got fewer characters, and it all happens in the same place. So it's really neat that you can create one post, a few different variations, tell Social Report when to push it out, and it'll go out at that time.
I'm using something, I don't think it's as robust as Social Report, but I'm using a platform called Missing Letter that I'm scheduling like all my posts for Resourceful Designer, and that they all go through there, and they go out to Twitter, Facebook. They go out to my Facebook page as well as my personal Facebook wall, or whatever you want to call it, and to LinkedIn. So I'm doing that, scheduling them out and over a course of a year and all that. I like that one. Now, when it comes to social and that, one thing we haven't really discussed hashtags, and that's something I know on Twitter I use hashtags, and I use hashtags on Instagram. Does LinkedIn and Facebook, it's one of those things that sometimes I hear yes, sometimes I hear no. So where do we use hashtags?
I think that's a really good question. And I'm going to go back a little bit to talk about what a hashtag is. So hashtags are really to help people find your content. So they're searchable aspects of social media. And so you can use them on other platforms like LinkedIn and Facebook. It's not really how people use them on those platforms, but you're not going to be penalized for using them. On a platform like Instagram, for instance, it's really kind of the heavy hitter for hashtags. You want to also think about how people would use the hashtag. So we mentioned before how as designers, sometimes we put hashtags for designers. So we may use words for designers. You want to make sure that you use words that your audience is using. So to really hammer in that yoga studio, I know I should probably think of another example, but you may want to use a hashtag, something like yoga studio website, or if you're local to your area, like I live in Niagara Falls, you may want to use Yoga Niagara or something like that so that the right people find your hashtags. But you could still use like hashtag Yoga Niagara on LinkedIn as well. It's just not how people use the platform yet. LinkedIn is one of those where they are trying to start using more hashtags. I just don't think users are really kind of using the way that the platform wants them to be used. So yeah, you just really focus in on the search terms that your audience is searching for, and that'll help people find your posts.
So do you recommend whenever we are using hashtags, do we pepper the hashtags within our content, or do we just add hashtags at the end of the content?
At the end usually is my preference, but they perform the same way.
Okay.
So it depends on the aesthetic that you like. I would say if you're using it within your post, just make sure it's clear. Especially for people who aren't internet savvy. So one of the challenges with using it within your post as well is if you're using two words like social media, if someone's not internet savvy, they'll be looking at that and go, why is that word that way? So you may want to use capital letters. So capital S, capital M, just for the user to read it, especially in the spaces that we're in. If someone's looking for a website or they're looking for some graphics to be designed, they may not be as internet savvy as we are. So we just want to make sure that it's clear what that post is for.
Okay. So this has all been some really great advice. Is there anything that we missed or any final advice you have for us?
If I could leave you guys with one thing, it would be to stay consistent. And it's something I've been talking a lot about lately, because I think it's easy to start with a social media strategy and go, I'm going to post every single day and I'm going to try to connect with 20 people a day. And after 2 weeks, you get burned out and then you don't open up your app again. And so even if you're starting off with a smaller kind of strategy than I suggested, I suggested 3 hours a week, but if you say I only have an hour, doing an hour a week consistently is way more impactful than trying to do 3 hours a week and then giving up after 2 weeks. So give yourself a little bit of patience, a little bit of love, and be consistent. That's the most important thing that you can do on social media.
Oh, that's really, really great advice. Well, thank you very much, Andrea. This has been really valuable. I'm sure my listeners are going to get a lot of use out of this. I know it's something that's come up in my Facebook group for Resourceful Designer many times. People are asking about social media. So this answers a lot of the questions that I know I personally had, and I've already written down a bunch of notes as you were talking of stuff that I have to change and do better. So I know that my audience is going to take action on this one and really enjoy this episode. So thank you very much for being part of Resourceful Designer.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. It's been fun.
Well, I hope you learned something from Andrea there. I know I certainly did. There were some very valuable lessons she shared with us, especially about LinkedIn. I really have to up my game on LinkedIn. Now, as I mentioned before the interview, Andrea does have her Savvy Social School that goes into so much more detail than what she was able to share today on the podcast. Now, I am a member of her school, and I can tell you that it is well worth the price of admission. But if you want to know more, and if you want to get a $20 discount off the price of admission, visit resourcefuldesigner.com/savvy, that's SAVVY, and the discount will automatically be applied to your registration. So I want to thank Andrea for joining me, and I want to thank you for listening to this episode of Resourceful Designer. I am Mark Decote, wishing you all the best with your graphic design business and hoping that your social media is on game. And of course, as always, reminding you to stay creative.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.